You're listening to Scribble Talk, a podcast for bid and proposal professionals. My name is Bhaskar Sundaram, and with my co-host,
Ashley Case,
we will be sitting down with our industry veterans to share their stories, discuss their career, and learn how to make an impact in the industry.
Today's guest is Tim Snell. Tim has more than 20 years of experience in helping companies create solutions to win business. He has worked in some of the most remote, austere, and dangerous places in the world, including Afghanistan, Iraq, Liberia, Mali, and Sudan, in support of military, United Nations, NATO, and commercial organizations. Tim is an executive and personal coach, business winning consultant and trainer. Tim is also an APMP Deputy Chief Examiner and a regular speaker and contributor to APMP. Welcome, Tim, to Scribble Talk. Great to have you with us.
Great to be here with both of you.
So, Tim, we're going to start kind of back at the beginning. We're curious, where were you born and where did you go to high school and get your education?
Yeah, it's a good question, given that I've lived in a couple of places. So I was born in Australia, down in Melbourne, for anybody who knows where that is. And in terms of my education, I actually moved around a lot. So I lived in Queensland and I lived in Victoria, where Melbourne is. And I actually ended up finishing my studies in Dubai. But I did my primary school education mainly in Australia and obviously my secondary, but my university I finished in the Middle East.
Oh, wow. That's very cool. So what was your first job?
My first job. Wow. Going right back. It was actually working in a pet store. I worked in an aquarium section of a pet store in Queensland, and I was essentially selling fish and coral and other aquarium-related products to customers on the weekend.
Okay, very interesting. So what got you into the proposal world?
Well, I think like many people, actually, I didn't set out leaving my education saying I wanted to be a bid manager or a proposal manager. It was just something that happened along the way. I'd been working in administration for different companies after I'd finished my schooling, and essentially was asked to support a general manager on a bid. And that then started, an adventure that has lasted for the last 20 years.
Wow, that's really cool. So you've been all over the world. Can you share some interesting memories from your global experience?
Yeah, so I started out traveling when I was quite young, and my first foray overseas was actually here to the UK back in 1999. But the most memorable experiences I have are from being in some of the places that you listed earlier, some of those more dangerous places, when I was working with a contractor to supply logistics services to the various militaries. And the most memorable place I've been to, which you didn't list, was Mongolia. And Mongolia was really cool because a lot of people in Mongolia who live in sort of the outer areas of Mongolia don't have a lot in terms of their possessions, and they live a very simple life. And they were still some of the most happiest people I met.
Oh, wow. That's very cool.
And so I think one of the other places I've been to that's really interesting was I was in Yemen before the current conflict. And again, it was a really interesting place because the people there, you see a lot of stuff on the media and it's not exactly what is portrayed on the media. But I went to Socotra Island, which is essentially the Galapagos of the Middle East, where there's a lot of endemic plant and animal species. And it was really cool just being there in this place that everybody had stayed away from. And I was one of the very few tourists that was there. So it was really cool being in this really exotic place.
Yeah, it sounds like you've been able to experience a ton of cultures and got to see a lot of things that many of us maybe will never ever see in our lifetimes.
I hope that's not the case. And I'm hoping that these places do, particularly Yemen, I hope it becomes accessible again in the future. And certainly Mongolia is a place where people should actually try and visit if they can. But yeah, I mean, I hope people get out and explore as much as possible, because travel really is the gift that you give to yourself.
Absolutely. So what about your proposal and capture experience? Do you have a most memorable effort that you've supported?
Yeah, I mean, over 20 years, it's hard to remember all of them. There's obviously a lot of water under the bridge over the last 20 years. But if I was to think about one that was particularly memorable, it was when I was working in the Middle East, a team of people who I'm still in contact with. We worked day and night for many weeks to pull together a bid effort that was worth quite a high value. And every time we thought we were going to submit the bid's deadline was extended, which, as we know, is not always a good thing because then it gives our competition more time to perfect their proposal. But it also means that people then have to readjust schedules and all of our contingencies sort of get thrown out of whack. But it was particularly memorable because it was such a high value. It was multiple boxes that needed to be put onto an aircraft and delivered from the Middle East to Europe. And I just remember the boxes being wheeled out in the early hours of the morning, and everybody sort of crawling out of the office to go home and sleep for at least a couple of days because it was such a big effort that we had to work on.
Yeah, those big ones are the ones that stick with us for a long time, right?
Yeah, they do. I mean, the good thing was that we won, and it was a good outcome for the company at the time. But it was just really, it was just such a big effort for everybody that I don't think it's one that anybody in that team would ever forget.
Oh, yeah. But always worth it when you win, for sure.
Tim, in between your traveling, Tim, you also managed to get into APMP.
Yes.
When did you actually join APMP as a member, Tim?
So I joined as a member back in 2011 when APMP was introduced to me through a training program offered by Sarah Jones. So Sarah had come to train all of the team members that were working for me in Dubai. Sure. And at the same time, we made sure that everybody was APMP certified to the foundation level.
Can you share some of the journey from the time that you joined as a member, Tim, all the way to the time you became the Deputy Chief Examiner?
Yeah, I think there's been a couple of different periods of my involvement with the APMP, and certainly I'd known about the APMP earlier when I was working in Australia. But it wasn't as well known, prior to me moving to the Middle East. So it's really when it came into my sort of sphere. And the work that I've been doing with the APMP, again, has been more recent with becoming the Deputy Chief Examiner and supporting Cathy Day in that role. But before that, I'd been to my first bid and proposal con in Dallas, which I think was 2012. I managed to fly all the way from Dubai over to Dallas to really see what the APMP was about in terms of the conferences. We'd also tried to set up a APMP chapter in the Middle East with a group of people when I was living out there around about the same time. But there were a number of restrictions to setting up charities in the Middle East at that stage, because essentially it had to be a not-for-profit. And so there were a number of hurdles that we needed to go through, which made that a very difficult process. But then I've started to present in 2017 when I really felt passionate about shifting the conversation from just being skills and knowledge focused, and really thinking about the behaviours that people in our profession need to exhibit, or the ways that they can change their behaviours to deliver better leadership.
In between, Tim, I think you managed to do your certifications as well, I hope.
Yes, I did manage to do certifications between 2011 and 2013. So obviously achieving my professional certification relatively quickly. But that was based on the fact that I had already had 10 years experience prior to moving to the Middle East.
That's brilliant. So now from attending conference, speaking in events, doing the certifications, and now becoming the Deputy Chief Examiner, you pretty much touched. What does the Deputy Chief Examiner do then?
Okay, that's a good question, Basco, because a lot of people may not realize what happens behind the scenes when we're looking at the professional certification, which is the area that I predominantly support Cathy Day with in terms of the Deputy Chief Examiner role. A lot of my role at the moment is focused on being the second interviewer. So my work is around being on the calls for the interviews that happen for the APMP's professional certification process, and also assessing with Cathy the impact papers as they come in for professional level candidates.
Wow, I think that's Exactly. I think that having a second opinion on things are always great. And how many of the professionals have you been involved now in the past year now, Tim, after you took up this role?
Yeah, to be honest with you, Bhaskar, I've lost count the number of the impact papers that I've probably sat on alongside with Cathy. And part of the reason is because it's not only the assessment of the impact papers, there's also been presentations at the previous APMP bid and proposal cons in the US, and also at the APMP UK events when we've done the professional primer. So I've had a lot of touch points, and I'll be honest with you, it's just a vague memory in terms of the number of people that I've spoken to, but certainly it's been quite a number.
That's brilliant. I mean, like for the past year, or I'm sure you know Cathy for a while now. Any interesting memories of working with Cathy, her style, and how do you adopt to her?
Yeah, Cathy and I work really well together in terms of bringing different perspectives to the APMP professional certification process. Mm-hmm. We both have a lot of experience. Certainly, Cathy has a lot more experience than me in the industry. But in terms of memorable moments, I think there's been a couple of memorable moments at the BPCs when Cathy has volunteered to help me with the presentations as a I don't know how you describe it, somebody who's helped coordinate the microphone in the room. And certainly I remember the first professional presentation I gave at the Bid and Proposal Con in New Orleans. We had to actually move all of the chairs out of the room. And it was Cathy's very calm way of organizing that really helped me get through that presentation in the end. But certainly we've obviously been on calls together a lot, and there's the interaction that we have on those calls with the candidates is also very important.
That's amazing, Tim. So you have one of the unique thing which I think, as Ashley pointed out, that hardly most people will have experience in their life, Tim. I mean, like, working for corporate or a federal or a UK government type bids is a different ball game. But what's your experience of working in the front line, field-based work, working on the bidding side on type of projects that requires you to travel to these places? How is it working in that sort of environment, Tim? If you can share some experience, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I've done it in a non-conflict zone environment where I had to travel to mining and resources operations throughout Australia. So prior to moving to the Middle East, I was actually traveling to some of the remotest parts of Australia, to mining camps to do sort of field assessments, and you were essentially taking small chartered planes out to mine sites and then doing meetings with the clients at those sites. They're not necessarily the most temperate of places, so you can find yourself spending a lot of time in high vis and high temperatures. There's a lot of movement control procedures to move around those sites for safety reasons. And I found that to be one of the really interesting parts of my job, was to go out and see the very places where the services would be delivered, but then to also conceptualize the types of solutions that we would need to provide to the clients to essentially win the business. And that goes the same not only for the mining and resourcing sites, but also for the other operations that I went to in support of military operations in places like Afghanistan. And then obviously in Iraq, I was in Baghdad, which was quite an interesting place to be at the time, because there were a number of complications to being in Baghdad during the time that I was there. And as I said before, a lot of movement control procedures that we need to take into account. And also a lot of, obviously, security protocols and just personal safety issues that you need to think about, as well as having to focus on the bid document and all the other things that happen behind the scenes with the proposals. So you've got, your mind is sort of split in different directions between keeping safe, gathering the information that you need, and then also being in contact as much as possible with the home base of operations to share the data that's coming through to help everybody conceptualize what needs to be developed.
That's brilliant. I mean, like, I've heard people talking bid rooms as war rooms.
Yes, I've heard that as well.
But in your case, this is a real war room.
Yeah.
It's very different. Yes, Tim. I think from that journey, Tim, and these days, over the past few years, you've been very passionate advocate of the personal side of a professional. So what fascinated you about this unique perspective of this human nature, especially in the bid and proposal world, Tim?
Yeah. It's a very good question, Bhaskar. We see a lot of the emphasis on the skills development and certainly the knowledge development that's needed to execute good proposals. But one of the things that I think is really important to remind everybody and remind ourselves is that at the end of the day, we're doing a very stressful job. And I think we see the reflection in the epidemic of stress that people are facing every day in their work. And that's not just in bid and proposals. I mean, that's just across the whole employment sector. And so we also know that the people in bid and proposal management aren't always recognized for the value of the contribution that they deliver to the ongoing success of the business. So, when people win proposals, it keeps people employed. And so it was really important for me to think about ways to motivate not only my team, but also to spread the message of how important it is to make sure that we are treating our people in a way that they want to stay in the organization rather than getting to the point where they burn out and then want to leave, which sometimes does happen. I think we all know somebody who's been through that process. And so my advocacy of, better leadership is really around getting the conversation started on how we can be leaders that inspire our people to do great work, but also providing a level of personal development for them and a recognized career path that may or may not be aligned to APMP Foundation practitioner or professional certification, but certainly providing some sort of career development pathway for them that they may not otherwise get. So there's sort of different elements, but I just saw that I saw a real need for that in the teams that I was working with, and that's what I strive to deliver for those people.
That's amazing, Tim. And you always use the term ignite the potential, Tim.
Yeah.
What does it mean to you?
So I believe that all of us have, an infinite potential to do and create what it is that we want to create in this world. We all come with our own unique gifts, and we fall into either a role or a position or a job that may or may not be aligned to exactly what we want to create in this world. And I think that when people really tap into their unique gifts and they really think about the impact that they want to make on the world, then I would, my thinking on igniting potential is being the catalyst to help those people see that potential within themselves so that they can make that impact on the world.
Wow, that's very powerful, Tim. So, Tim, I think more and more I hear people accepting or being victimized, like, as a bid and proposal professional, working long, working late is the only way forward. What advice would you give to those people to get back their life, Tim?
Well, I think firstly, it's a recognition within one's own self of what individual boundaries are. So part of the reason why this may be an issue in certain teams is because clear boundaries haven't been set either by the individual, but also perhaps aren't clear within the organization around, what is acceptable. Beyond the issue of working time regulations and other sort of legality, legal issues, it's really important that people have really clear boundaries around what they're prepared to do in order to win a proposal or to overextend themselves in trying to win work. I mean, everybody needs to be accountable and responsible for their own well-being. And I think the first step for people is to recognize, what is your personal boundary? And then to obviously have conversations with the people that you're working with around how those boundaries operate within the scope of the organization, and then how they can create, an agreement with the organization to make sure that there is a clear balance between the work that needs to be done and the rest that people need. Because one of the things that everybody probably recognizes in bid and proposals is the longer you work, the less effective you are, irrespective of whether that's bid and proposals, but particularly in a very knowledge-focused and intellectually intensive role, the more you actually work without taking breaks, the more you extend yourself late into the evenings, the less effective you are on the job anyway. So really, this is less, we can balance it out by saying it's not just about sort of the mental health and about getting balance to people's lives, but it's also about making sure that we're very effective in the roles that we're doing as well.
That's classic, Tim. And in the new kind of path that you're now, Tim, as a trainer, as a coach, and recently I also saw your post about retreats and stuff, Tim. How can that kind of the new support can help these people, Tim?
Yeah, that's a good question, Bhaskar. I think I'm still working very much in the business winning sphere, so that's an area that I haven't left, although I've shifted my focus on this. What I see is an opportunity for people to, rather than invest in straight up training, I think that there is obviously opportunities for people to take on micro-learning. And so I'm looking at ways that micro-learning can be created. I'm also looking at ways that people can benefit from different levels of coaching. Not everybody wants to go through a one-on-one coaching process. And in fact, a lot of people aren't aware what coaching is. And so I'm trying to raise the profile of that as a tool for development within teams. And then obviously the other work that you talked about is around retreats. And that's really about taking people into a much more deeper process around where do people want to go in their life, not only for their work or whether they're creating a business, but looking at, people as a whole person's journey. And so taking people outside of their everyday work environment to really explore what they want to create in the world.
I wish you all the success on that, Tim. Definitely, we need that sort of support for the sector. More and more uncertain environment kicks in. More and more people need support. I'm glad that you're doing this. I'll tell you a country name. If you could tell me what's your favorite food, Tim, that would be brilliant.
Okay.
So, Afghanistan.
My favorite
food.
My favorite food. Wow. In Afghanistan, I was actually eating, it's a really interesting question. I was actually eating in dining facilities that had a theme, which was either predominantly European or American. So my favorite food when I was there was actually Tim Hortons. Because it was the only branded outlet that I could get access to in Afghanistan.
Right. Okay. Let's see.
Iraq. So in terms of the food that I was eating there, it was actually very much local food. I couldn't give you any of the names of the actual dishes, but my favorite ones were predominantly meat-based dishes where it was served, they're often cooked in herbs and served with a rice and a side salad. But in Iraq, the food that we had was very much Iraqi, local flavored. And so it had very distinctive, strong, distinctive flavors. But as I said, often a meat and a mixture of rice and salad and meze type stuff.
No wonder people are going there for different reasons. Liberia?
Liberia, again, I was eating mainly in European cafes. So I didn't get to experience the local cuisine, predominantly because of movement control at the time. So I couldn't tell you what my favorite was from there, but definitely it wouldn't have been the local food, unfortunately.
Good. Okay.
Mali, gosh. Mali, I actually ended up at Lebanese restaurants because in Mali there was a fairly large Lebanese contingent living and operating in Bamako, where I was visiting. And so we went to the local Lebanese restaurant more often than not. Sudan, again, we're at the Lebanese restaurants.
Okay, now let's gradually move to your home, Dubai.
So where I was in Dubai, let me think about that. I'm going to have to come back to the Lebanese food. Maybe because my partner is Lebanese as well, but that's just, it happens to be one of the most flexible and versatile foods where you get so many different flavors. So you can go into a Lebanese restaurant and never have the same thing twice.
Is she listening to this conversation now?
No.
Right. Australia?
Throw another shrimp on the barbie, mate.
So the next ones are a lot easier. They're about you and kind of some fun, lighthearted questions.
Okay.
What would you name your boat if you had one?
I was actually going to say Bodie McBoatface, but that name's already taken.
Okay. Who is the messiest person you know?
Messiest person I know, apart from myself, according to my partner. I'm going to go with me.
Okay. What is the most useless talent you have?
Most useless talent I have. Okay. We're going to come back to that one.
Okay. What celebrity would you rate as a perfect 10?
Oh, man. Celebrities. You asked me, I don't even watch a lot of TV to know who the celebrities are these days. Sorry, Ashley, I have to pass on that one.
Oh, wow. Okay. What's a body part that you wouldn't mind losing?
I'm going to have to go with my toes.
Oh, okay.
Because I just think that they're kind of there. You could probably still walk without them.
All right. Don't pick your big toe then.
Okay.
What's the dumbest way you've been injured?
Dumbest way I've been injured. So I cracked my teeth by doing a jump on my bike when I was a kid and smashed my face on the handlebars. So knocked out a couple of teeth.
Oh, no.
Which is a pretty stupid thing to do.
Yeah, when you're young, you don't think about things sometimes, right? What's the most interesting thing you've read or seen this week?
Most interesting thing I've read this week, I was reading a book called Contagious, which is about how ideas go viral. And that's been a fascinating insight into, sort of how how ideas become viral. So that's been a really good book. And most interesting thing I've seen was watching Roger Hamilton on stage yesterday creating a business in front of a crowd of 150 to 200 people. But he essentially created it from nothing with one person's idea.
Wow, you've had a fascinating week. What ridiculous thing has someone tricked you into doing or believing?
What ridiculous thing has people tricked me into doing or believing? Gosh. I can be gullible, but I can't actually think of anything. Maybe it was investing in something that was never going to work out. I think we've all been down that path where we've made some bad investments, but that would probably come up as being one of the silliest things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think many of us can relate to that. Would you rather lose the ability to read or lose the ability to speak?
I'm thinking that in order to lose my ability to read would be the inability to see. So I'm going to equate that and say that there's other ways that I could communicate if I wasn't able to speak anymore.
Yeah, I think I would do the same. Would you rather know the history of every object you touched or be able to talk to animals?
I'd rather talk to animals.
That would be a fun one for sure, right?
Perfect. Sam, you passed the session.
I didn't realize it was a test, but gosh, some of those questions.
Yes, I'm sure you'll be nice to Ashley when she submits the professional paper. So yes, do you want to go back to the question that you missed?
What was that question again?
What's the most talent you have?
Oh, yeah.
Most useless talent I have. I'm going to say, I've done a lot of work learning how to, I'm just trying to contextualize this. I've done a lot of work in natural wisdom, and I wouldn't say that they're necessarily useless talents, but they're ones that I don't actually get to apply very often. I did a lot of work in the mystery schools, and it's one of those things. It's like really great knowledge and really great things to have as talents, but because I don't apply them, then they're not necessarily things that are very useful.
Thanks, Tim. Now let's go. So who are the people who have been the most influential in your life and career, who you are grateful to, Tim?
Yeah, I think this brings me back to my family. When I think about the encouragement that I was given from my family back in my early years, I was encouraged to go and be a doctor or a scientist, but I chose not to. And my parents were, very encouraging of saying, do whatever it is that you want to do. I don't think they had becoming a bid manager in mind when they were saying that. But certainly they've always been very encouraging and very supportive of every decision that I've made, even though it's meant that I've been living on the other side of the world for the last 10 years.
And parents, they are still in Australia, Tim?
Yes, very much. They will not be leaving Australia. They love it down there too much.
Okay. And in your career?
In my career, I've thinking about this, there's been a few people in my career, particularly when I started in proposal management way back in 1999 and 2000. When I was starting out, there was one person who was a general manager of the division at the time when I was working on complex recruitment and sort of multidisciplinary labour hire contracts. And he really reminded me of the power of story. And he introduced me to that concept that a good proposal has to also tell a really good story. And he was very passionate about it. And I can still hear some of the comments he used to make and certainly some of the feedback that he used to give on the proposals during that period of time. So that was quite formative in terms of the proposal, my earlier proposal career. But as I've sort of gone through into my later career, influential people have tended to be some of those people who've been there at pivotal points. So Sarah Jones came in at a time when we were looking at how do we create better cohesion in teams. And that really started me and my team on the journey of APMP. So that had a huge, obviously, influence back in 2011. And then more recently, it would be around the coaching and the people I've been working with in the coaching field, because that's introduced me to what I would term, real life entrepreneurs who've created incredible businesses and inspire you to look beyond what you're doing today and tomorrow to what you could create into the future.
That's amazing. Tim, I think you have a much broader kind of way of life here. And Tim, I know I should have asked you before, but let me ask here. You have traveled to so many countries, Tim. Is there any favorite country here?
Yeah, I go back to Bali quite frequently, relatively, maybe once every 2 years, certainly once a year if I can get there. And that's because it has such a balanced atmosphere. When you move outside the tourist areas, there's a lot of places where you can really just get away from the everyday and get back to nature, which I think is really important for all of us who need to take time away from our work. And then I also love, in Europe, I love going to Portugal at any time of the year because it always seems a little bit warmer than the UK.
That's nice, Tim. Yes, I've been to Bali twice, but you're right. I think that's kind of, it's like a magnet, that place. It just attracts you. What's the best piece of advice you have received and from whom?
Best piece of advice I've received has been from my grandparents and also my great auntie, who lived until the ripe old age of 94. But the advice that each of those people gave me, and I think this is advice that we hear very often, but I wonder how much we really connect with it. And the advice was, don't take it so seriously. Life is a marathon. It's not a sprint. Slow down and take the time to have more fun. Because every time I think they saw me, they saw that I was working really hard. I was flying all over the world, which always sounds really glamorous, but actually it can be quite exhausting as well. And so the advice that the repeating words were really just spend time with people that you love, make time to have fun, and really do something that you enjoy, because you don't want to get to the end of your life thinking, what did I spend all that time doing those things that I didn't really enjoy? And here I am at the end wishing I'd done something else.
Thanks.
Wow, Tim, that's amazing. It sounds like you have gotten to experience so many things and you've had so many positive influences. What's one thing you wish you had known when you began your career?
I wish back then, certainly it's more available for younger people today. So I wish for me back then that there'd been a much better curriculum around entrepreneurship, and certainly how people at a younger age can be involved in business creation, and a much more flexible approach to the way that young people can engage in businesses. That we're going back now 20 odd years. Those tools are already available for people today. And so what I'm seeing right now is something that I really wished I'd had. And that was a lot more financial literacy, a lot more business savvy, and how you can get involved in creating your own business or creating your own framework for a business. I wish that was what I'd had.
Yeah, we have a lot more tools, it sounds like, available to us, especially, I guess, with the internet too, right?
Yeah, I mean, the internet revolutionized things, but right now, even yesterday, I saw a young person at the age of 19 who was talking about investments in a way that I don't hear most 35-year-olds talking about investments.
Wow.
And certainly the opportunities that he was taking to work with people who had bought and sold multi-million-dollar companies, that certainly wasn't something that you could access very easily 20 years ago. So I really wish that, and certainly I encourage young people to get involved in entrepreneurship at a much younger age, because I see that as being a big shift that is coming for everybody in business into the future, whether that's an intrapreneur working within an organization to create new services, or as an entrepreneur going out there and creating a new part of your business or a new business.
Yeah, definitely a positive message. What are 3 things that not many people know about you?
3 things. Okay, so one of them is that I'm deaf in my left ear. So people often come up to me at events or try and speak to me on my left side, and then, or even sitting down at a conference table. I often find myself looking at a person thinking they've said something, and they had been, but they thought that perhaps I was ignoring them. So that's one thing. Another thing would be that I'm certified in yoga. I've done a lot of work, as I said a bit earlier. I did some work in natural wisdom. I'm certified as a yoga teacher. I'm certified as an energy healer, and I also have a few other more holistic wisdom disciplines. And I'm currently studying breathwork to be an instructor in breathwork. To really think about how people can be more mindful and more embodied, because I see those as being necessary for sort of dialing down the amount of stress that people face in the workplace.
Absolutely.
And another thing would be that a lot of people used to ask me, people said, "Oh, what did you study? How did you get to where you are?" And people were often surprised to learn that I didn't actually finish my first full degree until the age of 36, when I got my MBA.
Wow. Very interesting stuff, Tim. So what's next for you?
What's next? As Bhaskar mentioned earlier, I am looking more at the sort of people and human development side of our sector. I'm working on creating a program where people can get more and really a much more deep dive into where they want to go, either in their career or if they're creating a business. And I currently help people on their sort of career and business transition, and helping people step out of perhaps their corporate job and into a business that they want to create. So that's part of the work that I'm doing. And I'm also going to continue the development of a retreat program for next year. So I have one retreat program this year in June to help people find more flow through their business or their career. And next year I'll be doing something slightly deeper where people can really explore the inner mechanics of what it is that they want to create, and where they see their potential to create a different pathway.
Oh, that's amazing. Very exciting stuff on the forefront.
Tim, thank you so much for your time today. It's a real privilege to have you with us at Scribble Talk. I wish you all the success, good health and happiness for all the initiatives that you're going to do and you're going to help others. Please continue to inspire everybody around you, not only the bid and proposal professionals, but everybody around you, Tim. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bhaskar, and thank you, Ashley. I definitely intend to do that, and really appreciate your time and having me on here today to talk to you both.
To our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. Please visit batchyscribble.com/podcast to listen to this episode and check out any of our other previously recorded episodes. If you've enjoyed today's interview, don't forget to subscribe, review, and share the Scribble Talk podcast. We hope you'll check out our next episode where we interview another industry expert and special guest. Until then, it's Ashley Kays,
Bhaskar Sundaram,
signing off.